Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, July 10, 2024. House Republicans moved to pass a bill to require proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote in federal elections, and another bill to reverse the Education Department's regulation prohibiting transgender discrimination at schools under Title IX. While in the Senate, Democrats try to advance a bill to express support for reproductive rights. President Joe Biden visits the AFL-CIO Union Federation headquarters, part of his reelection campaign, and also tells NATO country leaders at the Washington summit, "We're investing in our future strength to ensure NATO will always be ready for whatever threats we'll face." Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she supports President Biden in any decision he makes about whether to continue to run for re-election, as an 8th House Democrat calls on President Biden to drop out. Pat Ryan of New York. This is all part of the ongoing discussion after the president's admittedly unsteady debate performance against former President Donald Trump. Senate committee holds a hearing on the plan to rebuild the collapsed Key Bridge in Baltimore with the central question, should the federal government pay the entire cost, which could be up to $1.7 billion. And EPA Administrator Michael Regan testifies before a House committee about the benefits and costs of air and water pollution regulations after the recent Supreme Court decision that reduced how much deference courts will give to a federal agency expertise when congressional authority in the area is unclear. Story from Fox News. Former President Donald Trump pushed a screed on Tuesday, warning Republican lawmakers that they have no choice but to pass the SAVE Act, warning our whole voting system is under siege. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act would amend the National Voter Registration Act, requiring states to obtain proof of citizenship from voters for federal elections and purging non-citizens from voter rolls. Donald Trump wrote on his proprietary social media platform Truth Social, Republicans must pass the SAVE Act or go home and cry yourself to sleep. He continued, non-citizen illegal migrants are getting the right to vote, being pushed by crooked Democrat politicians who are not being stopped by an equally dishonest Justice Department. That was a story from Fox News. The House debated and voted on the bill today. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, spoke in favor.
This will be one of the most important votes that members of this chamber will ever take in their entire careers. And it's an issue we never thought we would have to actually address, but that moment has come to us now. Should Americans and Americans alone determine the outcome of American elections? Or should we allow foreigners and illegal aliens to decide who sits in the White House and here in the People's House and in the Senate? As the progressive wing of Washington has slowly crept in and they've marched through our institutions and they've infected every level of government, they have brought us to a generation-defining moment. That's the moment that we have upon us now. And because the Democratic Party has shown time and time again that they want our borders wide open to every country on the planet, and that they want illegal aliens voting in our elections, we now have reached a fateful decision point. And here's the critical question. Should only American citizens of this country, be allowed to determine who controls the People's House, the Senate, and the White House? Now look, every Republican, emphatically, every one of our colleagues here says yes. The answer to that question is yes. And every Republican will vote for the bill that we have on the floor today. And this is a question that almost every American agrees with us upon. Here's the number. 89% of Americans believe that only Americans should decide our elections. And that includes, by the way, 82% of Democrats, 80% of Black and African American voters, 78% of Hispanic Latino voters. Everybody that looks at this question answers it the right way. Just about everybody. And we're about to find out here very shortly if all the members of this chamber agree. Because Americans all over the country understand what's at stake here. They refuse to hand over our country to illegal aliens, cartels, traffickers, and violent criminals and murderers. That's what's at stake.
House Speaker Mike Johnson on the House floor. An article from the Guardian newspaper about this bill reads, these changes, voting rights advocates warn, would prevent some U.S. citizens from voting, such as those who don't have the proper documentation or the ability to provide it in person. The bill could lead to people who are able to vote, such as naturalized citizens, college students, and tribal voters being removed from voter rolls. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. It's also illegal to register to vote if you aren't eligible. Federal voter registration forms require you to attest that you are a U.S. citizen. Some local elections allow non-citizen participation, but it is not the norm. There is no evidence of widespread non-citizen voting. That was from the article in The Guardian. And back to the House floor, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, speaking in opposition to the bill.
There is no evidence that has been presented to suggest that undocumented individuals have been participating in federal elections. Republicans who investigated these allegations on their own committee have been unable to document these allegations. It is unconstitutional. It is the state of the law that only citizens can vote in federal elections. Only citizens can vote for the House of Representatives. Only citizens can vote for the United States Senate. Only citizens can vote for the presidency of the United States. So this extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill is not designed to solve any problem on behalf of the American people. It is designed to jam people up and prevent Americans from voting. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill will not allow Americans to vote who have a state-issued driver's license. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill will not allow Americans who are serving in the military to use their military ID while they're serving this country to vote. The extreme MAGA Republican voter suppression bill won't allow young people, college students, who are attending state universities all across the land, who have been issued college IDs through their state colleges and universities to vote. There's a big difference between the House Democratic view of free and fair elections, the peaceful transfer of power, and government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and the extreme MAGA Republican view.
The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, on the House floor. Another bill brought up by the House Republican majority today would block the Education Department's new rule that prohibits schools from discriminating against transgender students by including gender identity in the definition of sex in the Title IX prohibition of sex discrimination in schools. Congresswoman Mary Miller, Republican from Illinois, supported this bill.
We recently celebrated the 52nd anniversary of this body passing Title IX. 52 years ago, everyone saw the need for equal opportunities in education, scholarships, and athletics for our girls. Title IX was enacted to do just that. But Joe Biden's new rule will erase those protections and opportunities for our girls. Unfortunately, the Democrats and the radical left don't know the difference between a man and a woman. So I'm proud to be leading this effort today to overturn Joe Biden's unlawful and radical destruction of Title IX. We keep hearing the Democrats parrot that they are just following the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock. That is a lie. The Supreme Court specifically said in that ruling that Bostock should not be applied to Title IX. This is from the majority opinion in Bostock. Quote, "We will not purport to address bathrooms, locker rooms, or anything else of this kind. But Joe Biden does not care about courts or the rule of law. He will do anything to appease the radical left. Biden wants to force biological men into our girls' showers and bathrooms. And the Biden Title IX rule will be the end of girls' sports. The prospect of this is sickening, and parents across this country are horrified. We must return We must pray for a return to the Trump administration policies that protected our girls from these vile left-wing people, their agenda to force biological men into our girls' safe spaces and sports. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution and to stand up to Joe Biden.
Congresswoman Mary Miller, Republican from Illinois, on the House floor, bringing up a resolution to block the Education Department rule. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Democrat from Oregon, spoke against.
Despite what my colleagues repeatedly claim, I thought I was in the wrong debate for a minute, this rule does not address students' participation in sports. This false narrative follows the many attacks against the LGBTQI+ community in this House and state legislatures across the country. We have had more than 60 anti-LGBTQI+ votes on the House floor of this Congress, and it's a distraction to claim that this rule harms women in sports. For example, the department has not issued a separate proposed rule to address athletics. They are working on it, but it has not been finalized. That's not the debate we're having today. Let me be clear. Trans girls, like all girls, deserve the opportunity to participate on school sports teams. But my colleagues across the aisle keep talking about athletics because they don't want to admit the truth behind this resolution. The resolution is an attempt to undermine non-discrimination protections for LGBTQI+ students. LGBTQI students, including trans students, deserve to go to school free from discrimination, and that's what this rule is about. It's not about bathrooms. In fact, the real risk of violence occurs when transgender people are barred from using the appropriate facility. Transgender people experience shockingly high rates of sexual and physical violence and are much more likely to be a victim than a perpetrator. And I am also extremely concerned about the false narrative that my colleagues have invented to portray trans individuals as criminals attempting to enter restrooms to harm others. That is not supported by evidence or data. Transgender people want the same thing everyone else wants: safety, comfort, and privacy. We must work to protect the transgender community from discrimination and stop the false narratives that exacerbate and encourage prejudice against innocent people. This bill is particularly extreme because passing it would prevent any substantially similar rule from being enacted on these issues in the future. Voting for this bill would prohibit protections for sexual assault survivors and protections against discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity in schools that receive federal funding.
Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Democrat from Oregon, on the House floor. The Education Department's final regulation on prohibiting transgender discrimination in schools is also being challenged in courts, and judges so far have put it on hold in 14 states as litigation continues. And the new Biden administration rules from the Education Department would also reverse former President Donald Trump's Title IX rules, which made it harder to report sexual assault and sexual harassment. Story from The Hill. Senate Republicans blocked an attempt by Democrats to pass a series of abortion-related bills Tuesday as the party seeks to keep a focus on abortion and access to reproductive health care ahead of the November election. One bill was aimed at protecting the freedom to travel across state lines to access abortion care. Another bill would have protected doctors in states where abortion is legal from being held liable for providing services to patients from other states. And a third bill was meant to support training more abortion care providers. That was from The Hill. In each case on Tuesday, a Democratic senator asked unanimous consent to pass the bill, and it was objected to by a Republican senator. Today, the Senate brought up and voted on whether to begin work on a bill titled Reproductive Freedom for Women Act, which would support reproductive rights. Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, spoke before the vote.
Abortion bans aren't about protecting anyone. They're about the right's obsession with power and control, plain and simple. But while Republicans continue their march toward a nationwide abortion ban, they refuse to be honest with the American people. Time after time, Republicans have come to this floor insisting that they support women's health, only to turn around and vote against bill after bill that would do just that. Despite their rhetoric, they voted en masse against the right to contraception, the right to IVF, and have consistently blocked any effort in this chamber to protect women's fundamental rights. But still, my Republican colleagues insist they stand with women. And today, they have the opportunity to put their money where their mouths are. The Reproductive Freedom for Women Act is straightforward. It simply expresses support for protecting access to reproductive health care. The bill is one page long and does not codify Roe or enact any policy changes. This should be a no-brainer for anyone who actually supports women and our right to control our own bodies. But if past is prologue, it is safe to say Republicans will vote against this bill today, only to insist tomorrow that they are the party of freedom. Give me a break. Democrats, meanwhile, are determined to restore, protect, and strengthen reproductive rights. And we will not stop fighting until we succeed in this. That is why today I am proud to stand with my fellow Democrats in voting for the Reproductive Freedom for Women Act to support reproductive rights and health care for all.
Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, on the Senate floor before she and a half dozen other Senate Democrats spoke about this bill, and they took the vote. A note that no Republican senators came to the floor before the vote. 60 votes were needed to advance the bill, and the vote falling short. From Associated Press, President Joe Biden met Wednesday with the Executive Council of the AFL-CIO, America's largest federation of trade unions, in an effort to shore up support from a critical constituency as he beats back continued calls to step aside in the 2024 campaign. "I think of you as my domestic NATO, not a joke," the 81-year-old Democrat told the crowd gathered at headquarters. He extolled the power of unions and told them of his long-standing support for them, telling the crowd even Wall Street was acknowledging the power of unions, as he once again articulated his vision for an economy built from the bottom up and the middle out. The AP article continues, so far the unions are sticking with the Biden administration despite widespread fears that his age handicaps his candidacy after his shaky performance in the June 27th debate. But some statements of support are also worded diplomatically to suggest a degree of flexibility in case Biden chooses to drop out. That article from AP. President Biden also contrasted his policies with presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump during this visit.
The fact of the matter is, take a look at what all the major economists, including the Wall Street economists, are saying. They looked at his proposal, what he's done, and what our proposal is moving forward. And overwhelmingly, you got 16 Nobel laureates in economic law, and they won the Nobel Prize for economics, 16 of them. And what did they say? They say his proposals are going to bankrupt the country. His proposals are going to cause a recession. His proposals are going to cause us higher interest rates. And what you and I, and you've been helping me, you've been either leading on, or I've been following you, or you've been following me, what we propose is growing the country. Right. No, we're the fastest growing economy in the world. That's a fact. We're the strongest economy in the world. But here's what we got to do. We've got to talk to our people. We've got to talk to our people. Food prices are still too high because of corporate greed. We're in a situation where rents are too high. We need more housing. A whole range of things we're going to get done with your help in the second term, because that's what we got to get done. So, folks, I've never been more optimistic about America's chances, not because of me, but because of what we're doing together. I really mean it. We're better positioned than any country in the world to own the remainder of the 21st century because of union labor. I'm serious.
President Biden at the AFL-CIO union headquarters in Washington, D.C. today. Start from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. The Biden administration on Wednesday took steps to close a loophole that allowed foreign steel makers like China to dodge tariffs by funneling product through Mexico. The new rules require greater supply chain reporting in an effort to enforce a 25% tariff on imported steel not melted or poured in Mexico. An article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Congressman Pat Ryan, Democrat from New York, posting today on X, Trump is an existential threat to American democracy. It is our duty to put forward the strongest candidate against him. Joe Biden is a patriot, but is no longer the best candidate to defeat Trump. For the good of our country, I'm asking Joe Biden to step aside, to deliver on his promise to be a bridge to a new generation of leaders. Congressman Ryan is now the 8th House Democrat to call on President Biden to end his run for president this year. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, Speaker Emerita, said in an MSNBC interview this morning that she supports whatever decision President Biden makes.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore, but he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. I think it's really important, and I would hope everyone would join in, to let him deal with this NATO conference. This is a very big deal. Over 30 heads of state are here. He is the host of it, and that means not just hosting, it means orchestrating the discussion and setting the agenda, and he's doing so magnificently. And I've said to everyone, let's just hold off. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately, but you don't have to put that out on the table until we see how we go this week. But I'm very proud of the president.
U.S. House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, on MSNBC this morning. Story from the Detroit News. Michigan U.S. Senator Gary Peters said Wednesday he supports President Joe Biden staying on the presidential ticket amid Democratic concerns over his electability, saying Biden can absolutely beat former President Donald Trump in November's election. Peters, who chairs the Senate Democrats' political arm, said, yes, absolutely, I believe President Biden can win, and I believe that we'll be able to hold the Senate majority, and I think we also have a good shot of expanding it. That article from the Detroit News also has this. On Tuesday, Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat from Colorado, became the first Democratic senator to say he doesn't believe Biden can win a second term following his halting and at times incoherent debate performance. That's how the Detroit News put it. Senator Bennet was on CNN last night saying that. Donald Trump, former president and the presumptive Republican presidential nominee this year, was interviewed today by Fox News radio host Brian Kilmeade, asked about his debate with Joe Biden.
You hadn't seen him in 3.5 years, and you saw him at 2020. He had 2 debates. What was the difference between the 2020 for Joe Biden and the 2024 Joe Biden?
Well, I thought he wasn't good at the debates. I thought I beat him badly in both debates. Some people said I was too aggressive in the first one and should have let him talk more, which I probably would agree with that. But I beat him in both debates easily by every standard. And second debate, he was saying things that were crazy. He talked about energy. Remember the last question? I said, it's Perry Mason time, meaning he admitted something that he should have never said. But no, I think, he was worse than this one, but I don't know. Something.
Do you think he was?
Maybe something's wrong. Maybe something. Look, he has the delegates. He's allowed to run. They're not going to stop him. He's allowed to run if he wants to. The only thing that can stop him if he decides he can't do the job.
Couple of things.
And that's a big admit. If he decides he can't do the job, that's a very big statement. He shouldn't have been doing it anyway. Look, he's done a horrible job. We're in wars all over the place. We have inflation, the likes of which no one's ever seen before. We're not respected on the world stage. Right. We had the most embarrassing event in the history of our country, Afghanistan. Not that we got out, because I was getting out, but I was getting out with strength and dignity.
Former President Donald Trump today on Fox News Radio's Brian Kilmeade show. He is expected to be formally selected as the Republican presidential nominee next week at the RNC convention in Milwaukee. Story from AP. Movie star and lifelong Democrat George Clooney added his voice to calls for Joe Biden to leave the presidential race on Wednesday, just weeks after headlining a fundraiser that brought in a record single-night haul for the president's reelection campaign. Clooney said in a New York Times opinion piece that he loves Biden, but the party would lose the presidential race as well as any control in Congress with him as the nominee. Focusing much of his piece around Biden's age, Clooney noted differences he saw in the 81-year-old president during their recent Los Angeles event compared to years past. It's devastating to say, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big Effing Deal Biden of 2010, Clooney wrote. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. That was from Associated Press. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hi, I'm Susan Swain. This summer, I'll be on the air from Milwaukee and Chicago for C-SPAN's live gavel-to-gavel convention coverage. It's been a mainstay of our network since 1984. What has changed in recent years is C-SPAN's funding, now challenged by the many homes who have opted to cut the cord. This summer, an anonymous donor is generously helping support C-SPAN with a matching gift campaign. Every dollar given will be matched up to $25,000. Please consider giving to support our no commentary convention coverage and all of C-SPAN's public affairs programming. To learn more or to make a donation, find us at cspan.org/donate. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's free and wherever you find your podcasts. It's day 2 of the 75th anniversary NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Some headlines from CNN. On Wednesday, President Biden opened the first working session of the summit by saying NATO members need to ramp up their industrial production to keep pace with Russia's manufacturing of military supplies. U.S. also announced F-16 fighter jets are heading to Ukraine after Biden announced plans to supply new air defenses as the country continues its battle against Russia's full-scale invasion. And in a joint statement Wednesday, the governments of Germany and the U.S. announced they would begin episodic deployments of the long-range missile capabilities from its multi-domain task force in Germany starting in 2026 as part of planning for enduring stationing of these capabilities in the future. That was from CNN. Here is President Biden at that working session.
75 years ago, when our nations created the alliance, President Truman said, quote, "We hope to create a shield against aggression, the fear of aggression, and to permit us to get on with the real business of creating a government and society." For 75 years, our nations have grown and prospered behind the NATO shield. Today, we're stronger than we've ever been. Since I took office, we've doubled the number of battle groups in NATO's eastern flank, and the United States has. Finland and Sweden have joined the alliance, and the number of allies spending at least 2% on defense has gone from 9 to 23. That's not happened by chance, but by choice. At our summit 2 years ago, we launched a plan to modernize our deterrence and our defense. And today, we have to ask ourselves, what is next? How can we keep making the shield stronger? One answer must be to strengthen our industrial base. Right now, Russia is on a wartime footing with regard to defense production. They're significantly ramping up their production of weapons, munitions, and vehicles. And they're doing it with the help of China, North Korea, and Iran. We cannot, in my view, we cannot allow the alliance to fall behind. The fact is that so many of let me put it this way. I'm very pleased that today all NATO members are making the pledge to expand our industrial base and our industrial capacity, like our defense spending commitment. This is a critical step to maintaining our security. The first time ever, every NATO nation is pledging to develop plans for defense production at home. That means, as an alliance, we'll become more innovative and competitive. And we're able to produce more critical defense equipment more quickly than we may need it. You know, we will not be surpassed, we cannot be surpassed by anyone when it comes to our readiness. Here at home, Americans have seen the power of investments like these. In my administration, we've already invested $30 billion in defense manufacturing to restart or expand production across 35 of our states. We're investing billions more The result, stronger supply chains, a stronger economy, stronger military, and a stronger nation. Let me close with this. This new pledge sends an unmistakable message to the world that every NATO member is committed to doing their part to keep the alliance strong. We can and will defend every inch of NATO territory, and we'll do it together. And that we're investing in our future strength to ensure NATO will always be ready for whatever threats we will face should be a clear message we're sending to the world. So I want to thank you, every NATO member, for your commitment for our shared security. And I will now ask the press to depart so we can get started.
President Joe Biden speaking to the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Earlier in the day, Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke about new aid for Ukraine and the announcement of the delivery of the first F-16 fighter aircraft.
You heard the president yesterday talk about the work that we've done and other allies have done to put together more air defense systems for Ukraine, notably Patriots, but also many other systems, because we know that's the key to so many things. It's a key to defending Ukraine's infrastructure. It's a key to defending its people. It's a key to defending its forces. It's also key to making sure that we're unlocking the private sector and economic investment in Ukraine that will also be essential to Ukraine's success going forward. But people need to make investments in secure environments. So these air defense systems, we know, have been job number one for Ukraine and, as a result, for the alliance that's supporting it. But this is just part of a comprehensive package that we're putting in place, that we've actually put in place since before day one, to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to defend itself when it needs it. And I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands. And those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken today at the NATO Public Forum, which NATO says is held in parallel to the Washington summit and is co-hosted by NATO, the U.S. government, and think tanks, including the Atlantic Council, the Center for a New American Security, and the Hudson Institute. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Washington attending the NATO summit, meeting today with leaders of the U.S. House and Senate on Capitol Hill. On Thursday, he'll have a meeting with President Biden. President Zelensky posting on X, "I'm grateful to the United States, Denmark, and the Netherlands for taking practical steps to achieve the goal of all Ukrainians to strengthen the Ukrainian Air Force with F-16s. I am grateful to Belgium and Norway for their commitment to provide us with their F-16 jets. This is a clear signal that Russia's ability to terrorize Ukrainian people, cities, and communities will continue to reduce." Last night, Tuesday night, President Zelensky was interviewed by Brett Baer, a Fox News channel, at the Ronald Reagan Institute.
I do want to say that we're all really saddened by those devastating attacks, especially on the Children's Hospital in Kyiv. And I can hear in your voice how much it hits you, especially as a father.
For me, it's, it's always for everybody, I think. It's very sensitive. I'm the father, I'm the president, I'm a human. Yeah, so it's so difficult. It's so difficult to lose people. It's so difficult and to lose children. And of course, you see these people, you see parents, and then when their children are dying or dead, so it's you want to kill Putin at this moment. And of course, all of us, we want it very much. Really, because he's not. I think that he's at this moment. Maybe he's drinking something. He's not thinking. For him, it doesn't matter what's going on in Ukraine. So the attack was. What is the tragedy? It was not attack on some military object or something like this, and something was not good with a missile or something. No, the missile was exactly to the hospital. It's not the first time, and that's why so you have such emotions.
Do you think that it was meant to strike the day before the start of the NATO summit?
NATO, that his signal. That's his signal to the world, to all the people. That's the signal to NATO countries, to all our allies. This is the signal. He will live this way, and he will do this way.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky Tuesday night at the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C. He's in Washington for the NATO summit. Story from Politico, NATO is set to back Ukraine's irreversible path to joining the alliance in the future, according to a draft summit communique seen by Politico. The language in the communique also gets more critical of China than in statements from previous summits, referring to China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine. Final wording of the statement is still under discussion, but these passages are widely expected to go into the final version, a diplomat said. That was from Politico. During today's official summit opening ceremony, President Biden shook hands with the leaders of the other 31 member countries, and it was the first time meeting the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom as Prime Minister, Labour Party leader Keir Starmer. And those two will have a bilateral meeting at the White House tonight. Prime Minister Starmer stopped by the media stakeout area after the so-called family photo of those NATO leaders.
I've just had a very good meeting with President Zelensky where I made it absolutely clear that as far as the UK is concerned, the change of government makes no difference to the support that we will provide. We've been united on this when we were in opposition. It was really important to me to be able to affirm that face-to-face in the meeting. I did speak to him immediately after I was sworn in as Prime Minister last week. And so we build on that here at NATO at this important summit because it is an opportunity for our Labour government to reaffirm our commitment to NATO. We obviously signed the original treaty way back. We reaffirm today, but also to discuss with President Zelensky what further support that he needs, and to use our opportunity here with our allies to make sure that that support is agreed and to reinforce, in a sense, as a message to Putin, the resolve of NATO, bigger now than it's ever been, more united than it's ever been, and absolutely clear-eyed about the threat of Russian aggression. Very good bilateral meetings that we've had an opportunity to make sure that those relationships are reset. For me to be able to say that our position on the world stage, leading on issues like defence and security, on climate change and on energy are so important. So a really good opportunity. But now we go on and do the work in Council.
Finally, you're looking forward to the White House later?
I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the opening ceremony of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. A lot of other events happening during the summit. Tonight, President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden host the leaders and their spouses for a White House dinner. And President Biden has scheduled a news conference Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll have live coverage on C-SPAN Radio. This is Washington Today. On Wall Street, the Dow up 429, NASDAQ up 218, S&P up 56. Story at the Baltimore Banner. Maryland's U.S. senators are continuing their push to have the federal government pay the entire cost of rebuilding the Francis Scott Key Bridge, calling on their colleagues to pass legislation to authorize the spending. Typically, in emergency response funding, the federal government will foot a significant portion of disaster relief projects, usually about 80 to 90%, with the state on the hook for the remainder. Federal authorities will give the state the remainder of the needed funds. With the agreement, it will be paid back. But Senators Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, both Democrats, are asking their colleagues in Congress to pay the entirety, arguing at a Senate hearing Wednesday the scope and scale of the Key Bridge disaster warrants a full payment. And the Baltimore Banner article also notes that President Biden has said he wants the federal government to pay the full cost of the new bridge. The estimated rebuilding cost is up to $1.7 billion. C-SPAN covered this Senate Environment and Public Works Committee hearing today. The ranking Republican, Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, said she didn't blame the Maryland senators for making the request for full funding. She said she would have done the same for her state. But she asked one of the witnesses, Paul Wiedefeld, Maryland Transportation Secretary, about the fact that the Key Bridge was, and will be again when rebuilt, a toll bridge.
Why is it wrong to assume, if you're the American taxpayer, that since you have a dedicated source of revenue there, that over time you would not be asked to pay the 10% cost share that Maryland would have to bear?
I think
make the argument there.
Sure. No, I think there's some other factors here. One is we are losing revenue now, right? And we'll continue to lose that revenue through the next 4.5 years, is what we're projecting right now. So we're losing those dollars now. The other part of that is, in effect, we are costing businesses and people every day by the delay of this bridge being built, by any delay, potential delay of this bridge being built. So all those are added costs that, in effect, we're trying to cover now so we can get this bridge done as quickly as we can.
So are you telling me that the state of Maryland now, I know I'm over my time, but I think this is really the crux of the I don't even want to say it's a disagreement so much, but is to try to figure out the best way to do this, is that the cost that the state of Maryland is bearing now should also play into what Maryland should bear in terms of the rebuild of the bridge?
No, I guess what I'm saying is that we are the insurance comes to $350 million.
Right.
So that's supporting it. There is a burden
that will go back to the emergency.
Sure, but getting back to the larger issue of the scale of this project and the impacts of it, there's this other impact that we are going through now with the loss of revenues for the toll authority for the next several years.
Paul Wiedefeld, Maryland Transportation Secretary, questioned by Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, the ranking Republican on the Environment and Public Works Committee, during today's hearing on the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse and rebuilding plans. Other witnesses came from the Federal Highway Administration and the Army Corps of Engineers. The Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testified today before the House Financial Services Committee after yesterday's appearance before the Senate Banking Committee as part of his semi-annual monetary report to Congress. Chair Powell writes, AP reinforced the message that the Fed is paying growing attention to a slowing job market and not only to taming inflation, a shift that signals it's likely to begin cutting interest rates soon. There's also this from the AP article. Under questioning from several Republican lawmakers, Powell said the Fed and other financial regulators will overhaul a 2023 proposal known as the Basel III Endgame that would raise the amount of capital that banks are required to hold against potential losses. Large banks have aggressively fought against the stricter requirements, which emerged in the aftermath of the 2007-2008 financial crisis. They have warned the tighter rules would force them to cut lending to consumers and businesses, potentially imperiling the economy. That was from AP. Here is the chair of the committee, Congressman Patrick McHenry, Republican from North Carolina, questioning Chair Powell.
Your testimony about Vice Chair Barr's discussions with the FDIC and with the OCC on the next steps for the Basel III Endgame. You mentioned potential changes have been made to the original Basel III Endgame, that a lot of progress has been made, and that the board is very close to agreeing on the substance of those changes. But the next steps, that's really what I want to get into. Let's get through the mechanics of what happens next. If the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC agree on the substance of whatever changes you're going to make, what happens then? Walk through the mechanics as you anticipated.
Okay. So we're very close to having exactly that agreement on the substance of the proposed changes pursuant to those talks. The next question then is how to proceed. And it is my view and the strong view of a number of board members that the appropriate thing to do is to take that new proposal and publish it along with the effects of the quantitative impact survey and put that out for comment again and receive comment on that and then take some time to review those comments before finalizing the regulation. And that's a discussion we're having with the other two agencies now. We have not been able to reach agreement on a path to do that, but that's something that we think is the right way to do. That's what we've done in similar situations. There aren't that many similar situations, but when we see broad and material changes to an important regulation, we think let's go out again and give all the commenters another chance to comment.
Yeah, and that also avoids serious lawsuit risk and the risk that Congress step in and overturn this rulemaking using the Congressional Review Act. I think the other agencies here, if they're not agreeing with the Fed, they're running against the independence of the Federal Reserve here. This is not a trifling matter of policy. This is a matter of real substance for the independence of the Fed and rulemaking at the Federal Reserve, which I think we should be able to keep the independence of the Fed separate, especially in this political environment.
The Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell questioned by the House Financial Services Committee Chair Patrick McHenry at today's hearing. Story from Reuters. Chair Powell said on Wednesday the U.S. Central Bank will make interest rate decisions when and as they are needed, pushing back on a suggestion that a September rate cut could be seen as a political act ahead of the fall presidential election. EPA Administrator Michael Regan, writes E&E News, warned lawmakers against gutting his agency as a potential second Trump administration looms. Regan on Wednesday made his first appearance before the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, where Republican lawmakers pressed him on a number of EPA regulations targeting heavy industry. But Democratic members on the panel took the opportunity to defend the agency that has been bolstered by the Biden administration with billions in supplemental funding. That from E&E News. Congressman Gary Palmer, Republican from Alabama, asked Administrator Regan about a just finalized rule from the EPA. And from another article from E&E News, it tightens air toxic regulations on lime manufacturing plants, adding emissions limits for mercury, hydrogen chloride, and other previously unregulated hazardous pollutants.
The House of Representatives sent 2 letters to the EPA. One was in December of last year, one was April of this year, signed by 22 members respectively, including 10 members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Both the letters raised serious questions about whether the EPA's proposed $2 billion regulation on the lime industry is necessary, given that the EPA's own scientists have determined that the emissions from lime plants are already acceptable with an ample margin of safety. And in September of last year, the House Science Committee held an oversight hearing, and you testified that you think, and you said this, I think what we want to do is to ensure that we're meeting the letter of the law with as much flexibility as possible. I think we have to be reasonable, and I think what we want to do is protect public health and ensure that these industries can be productive. How in the world is finalizing a $2 billion regulation providing as much flexibility as possible and being reasonable?
Well, I think if you look at that finalized action, we took into consideration many of the recommendations that industry asked us to.
Do you know what lime is used for?
To protect health and
Administrator Reagan, do you know what lime is used for?
I absolutely do.
What's it used for?
Well, it can be used for a lot of things.
Yeah, but what is it primarily used for in the construction?
You can use lime for agriculture. You can use lime for construction. I mean, there's a lot of.
You can't make. It's a key ingredient in concrete cement.
It's a key ingredient in a lot of things. It's not just cement.
And you just imposed a $2 billion regulation on it, then all that cost can be passed on to consumers to increase food prices.
We put protective standards in place so that workers and people who are exposed to lime.
But your own administration says that you've determined it's acceptable with an ample margin of safety. That's not reasonable.
It's acceptable in certain instances. I think that's a narrative or a context that I'd love to have this conversation. Maybe we could look at the full breadth of the statement that the scientists are making. I'm very aware of the statements that our scientists are making, and so I think that may be out of context.
Well, I'm very encouraged by the Chevron deference being overturned, because it will restore to Congress our lawmaking authority and remove it from these agencies. I yield back.
Congressman Gary Palmer, Republican from Alabama, questioning the EPA Administrator Michael Regan at today's Oversight and Accountability Committee hearing. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, Democrat from Virginia, has unveiled an artificial intelligence, AI, recreation of her voice as she continues to deal with a neurodegenerative disease that has made speaking and being understood very difficult. Here's part of the video she posted today on X.
Over the past couple weeks, my team and I have compiled old clips of my public speeches like this one. I rise in support of House Resolution 79, which is my resolution expressing the sense of the House of Representatives that government shutdowns are detrimental to the nation and should not occur. To generate an AI model of what my voice sounded like before PSP began to affect the volume and clarity of my speech. This will be a big upgrade from the robotic-sounding text-to-speech app I've been using over the past few months. It's also a big deal for the many Americans who have faced similar health-related speech challenges. Since I first began using an augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, device for speeches on the House floor and in committee, I've received an outpouring of supportive messages from disability rights advocates about the importance of demonstrating that just because people like me may not be able to use our voices in the same way, doesn't mean our words are any less ours or any less important to hear.
Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, Democrat from Virginia, debuting her new artificial intelligence voice in a post on X. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word, to get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.